Yeah, people only root for those who don't need to be rooted for.
People are afraid of not getting validated, or they're afraid of judgment that they perceive from other people that exist or don't exist in their lives. A lot of people just underestimate the amount of effort it takes to go from good to great. I think the things that were withheld from us are the things that usually we seek the most. I think how many really successful guys have daddy issues, and so for whatever reason they have this second voice that criticizes everything they do that in reality isn't even there. But I would say 99% of the things that I've learned through doing. Like, competitors don't put you out of business, but you obsessing over competitors does. My future self would trade all the money he had to be poor in 20 again. Made me really reanalyze how I saw living life in the moment.
Promise you, every single person who wants to do something with their life and has done something with their life has gone through the exact chapter that you're going through. And it's the lonely chapter. It's the chapter where you don't fit in with your own friends, but you don't have the outcomes yet to fit into a new group of friends. And you're doing this thing, you're consuming content on the internet, you're doing these free tutorials online to try and figure out how to set up a podcast and where do I host this thing? And then and you're going through this and you're like, is this even worth it? Because you have no signs of success, right? But if there's anything that you can take away from what we're saying right now, is that the sign of success is the hate that you get along the way. And what you can't do is bend the knee to their hate and fit back into the conformity because it's comfortable and it's warm. Because like in the Matrix, when Trinity opens the door, when Neo's about to go take the red pill and he wants to get out of the car, she says, Neo, you've been down that road and you know exactly where it leads. And I know that's not where you want to be. And then he closes the door. Like right now, this moment that you're going through is Trinity opening the door and being like, you could go back. But then you'd have to remember exactly what the reason was that you decided not to go out to begin with, just because you listen to this podcast and you consume this content and you're like, I can fucking do more than this. Like, because you are starting to live in some of that hell where you look in the mirror and you're like, I can do more. And you start to see the person that you could be. And you're like, this does start to feel like hell. The path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be. It takes more effort to start in the beginning, and more people are right about the fact, they're like, hey, you're not going to hit it big. And guess what? A month in, you're not. But they're only measuring on months. And at 6 months, you're also not going to have hit it big yet. And they're going to be like, I'm still fucking right. And at a year, you're still not going to have hit it big. And they'll still be fucking right. And every day that you haven't hit it, they're going to feel like they were right. But they're wrong, because they're measuring in days and you're measuring in decades. But I didn't get here doing everything that I love. I did a fuckload of shit I hate, and I did it for a very long period of time. And I did not have anyone to root me on. And in fact, I had many people who were actively trying to destroy my path and tell me why it was a terrible idea. There's so much opportunity on the other side of being willing to persist for an extended period of time on the correct path without getting positive reinforcement from your environment. And the longer you can stick with something without that positive feedback loop in terms of the big external thing, the easier the opportunities are, because so few people can pursue them.
You're going to lose sleep. You'll doubt whether it'll work. You'll stress to make ends meet. You won't finish your to-do list. You'll wonder whether you made the right call and have no way to know for years. This is what hard feels like, and that's okay. Everything worth doing is hard, and the more worth doing it is, the harder it is. The greater the payoff, the greater the hardship. If it's hard, good. It means no one else will do it. More for you.
You can pretty easily tell how successful an entrepreneur is by looking at two elements of time. One is the increments of time they speak in. So if they talk in decades, they talk in multiple decades, they talk in lifetimes, they talk in generations, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be a significantly more successful entrepreneur than the one who talks about next week, next month, even next quarter. And it's such a small thing, but it's pervasive. Like, you can hear it in conversation. You can immediately know, oh, this guy's only doing this much. Because the only way to do really big things is to think on a much longer time horizon. The second component is how they manage the micro, which is if you look at someone's calendar and how they allocate their most scarce resource, which is time, you can see where they're going to be in 6 or 12 months. So if you look at the calendar as the balance sheet of someone's time asset and how they allocate it, their time budget, then you will see where they're going to get their returns. And so we look at a founder and we look at their calendar, we can tell how the company's going. We can usually see how we need to fix it, because fundamentally most entrepreneurs work all the hours of the day. Most of them do, right? And so if they're not making the amount of money that they want to make, it's because they're doing the wrong stuff. And that's usually the biggest issue. And they think they need to work harder, but they've already maxed out their hours, which means fundamentally they're wrong. They're seeing a distorted reality. They think this is going to work, and it is not.
What I'm going to say, and I have very strong views, and they are not common, but I also think that I don't want to live a common life, and so that I cannot have common views, right? So just like as a big disclaimer to that. Like, I've only seen two dynamics that work in relationships over like an extended period of time. One is kind of the like we're in it together, and the other is like the, you know, cheerleader and quarterback, like cheering you on. But the thing is like I can speak a lot to the, you know, we're in the game together. For me, I know personally, like I had two very long relationships that were cheerleader dynamics. And to me, I could not imagine living life that way, having now lived what I live now. Because like there's a certain amount of shared respect that you never get with somebody who does not know what it's like to be in the battlefield or in the arena. And if I'm like, I need to work for the next 3 days and like write 5 book chapters, like there's not a discussion. It's like, of course, do your thing. There's no like, I can't believe you're like, and to the flip side, in the cheerleader dynamic, a cheerleader who's really rooting for the team doesn't ask the quarterback to come out when the game's on the line. And so I think that a lot of people are running in what they consider to be cheerleader dynamics, but they are inverted dynamics. They're actually sabotaging the game. And I think that it's like in that dynamic, it's harder, in my opinion, to do the cheerleader quarterback because you have to have a very aligned mission and goals of like the relationship. It's easier to do that in the dynamic that you're working together because it's so clearly stated with the mission and the goals of like, this is where I want to go and this is how I want to get there, and like, do you want to come with me? And then you're very much operating on this shared sense of reality. And it also becomes difficult for entrepreneurs, in my opinion, now. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen plenty of people get divorces as they get older and whatnot. Is that like, if you're like, all right, this will be interesting. Mm-hmm. So typically, when people become attracted, so Esther Perel, if you've heard of her, she's really interesting, like relationship person. She's like one of the top TED Talks on it. I think it's called Mating in Captivity is her book. But in the beginning, you have kind of this mystery because you don't know each other, and that's what creates like the excitement, right? And as you get to know each other over time, you swing like from mystery to familiarity, right? You get a little bit more security, you get to know each other better, and it feels like more and more amazing. And so what you do is you just keep trying to do that, right? But what ends up happening is that you overcorrect, and then you become siblings. And then it's like, well, that's not good. And so it's not a problem to be solved, but a dichotomy to be managed, right? In terms of like how much space do you create versus how much familiarity. What happens when people, like entrepreneurs specifically, like have their business and they have the wife, they spend more time in the beginning, and all of a sudden they don't spend as much time together, and then they grow apart because they're also exposed to different stimuli, right? And so you adapt to the stimuli that you have and you grow apart. On the flip side, if you're in my scenario where we're like doing the same thing together, the downside of this one, these couples make 5 times more money than any of the other versions that I just said. But you can become too familiar and then you just become siblings. So for us, we actually create more space. So it's like we try to work on separate sides of the house. We don't attend the same meetings. So like at the end of the day, we can sit down at dinner and be like, how was your day? And she can tell me something rather than me saying like, oh, I was there, I know, right?
Yeah.
And so the happiest couples are actually couples that have both have careers that are not necessarily together. So on average, these couples are the ones that, because they have a shared goal in terms of like, this is what we want to do. They have shared values in terms of how they want to get there. And they respect one another and they respect each other's goals. And then they walk kind of in parallel. So you've got the, like, I'm working the entrepreneur, and then you've got the stay-at-home wife. There's many times everyone's seen that one go wrong. There's the, like, we're both working together in it, so these people have to correct for trying to create more familiarity. These ones have to create more space, so you have the space to be missed. And then these ones tend to be in the middle already, and so they just kind of like have to keep walking. And so for me, it was actually just interesting seeing the different dynamics and like how we had to correct in the beginning. Like we spent all day, every day together, and the business was small, so it was like she was there and I was here, and we worked out together and we ate together, and we did that for like 2 years. And I was like, maybe I'll sit on different meetings than you.
Yeah.
But like seeing the level of like commitment and loyalty that you get from that, and I don't know. So I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I have strong beliefs around that, and I think that you don't have to compromise anything if you don't want to.
Well, I didn't get his respect, so I'm going to have to compensate with my circumstances, with my environment, so that everyone respects me. Mm-hmm. And some people do that through fear, some people do that through violence, some people do that through success. It really just depends what vehicle you choose. But like, I feel like the deep need is the same. Then we gain more leverage over our time, which we then know we will compound into money. Because I think if you can master the time, you master them. I am the person who has done these things, and I will do things that will get me closer to the things that I want to achieve. And so a lot of my definition of self has always been based on evidence. And so I think it was harder for me in the beginning because I didn't have evidence to support what I hoped to be true about myself, which at the time wasn't. And so
what did you hope to be true? That you could figure it out, or was it always a result?
if I can just decrease the action threshold for people to begin and be okay with the fact that they're going to suck, and it is okay to suck. You should expect to suck. And it would be unreasonable for you to be good if you haven't done it before. And so it's like, are you asking the universe to be unreasonable for you by expecting to be good on your first try?
And so I just asked him a couple questions. I was like, who here before pledging started was like, I want to be a part of this house? The guys were like, me. Okay. I'm like, okay, got it. Who here thought it was going to be easy? Who here thought it would be hard? They raised their hands. I'm like, guys, this is what hard feels like. And all of a sudden there's just like this big exhale in the room. And they're like, expectations get reset. This is normal. You wanted this thing. You expected it to be hard. Reality now matches conditions. Sorry, expectations now match conditions. This is what hard feels like. And then all of a sudden it's like they got permission to feel shitty. And by getting permission to feel shitty, they stop feeling it. And the next one is like, what if we confront it and say like, what if they're right? Now what? Because I think a lot of effort gets put into trying to deny reality, right? Like there's this clip that I shared from Tom Bilyeu, and he was talking about how he gets made fun of for his ears being big, right? And I think it's a really good clip because his point that he was making, because it's such a visual, easy example for people to understand. He's like, is that it's true. I do have big ears. And so that's like if they're like, you have no right to be making content. Are they right? Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm still going to do it anyways. Because the thing is like, one of the things that I had earlier on in my career was like, I didn't think I was a really good person. Like I was like, I'm not a good person.
Yeah,
like some people are like, yeah, I just had that. Right. And I had a history, whatever. And one of the things that gave me a lot of respite or relief from that kind of thought process was like, that's okay. Because I can still do the things that create success and not deserve it and still get it. And that actually felt very powerful for me because it was like, I don't have to deserve to success. I can still just do the stuff that gets it. It's like, you don't have to deserve the girl, but you can still do the things that get her. And do you deserve her when you have her? I don't know. Who knows? I hate the word deserve to begin with, right?
Yes.
But like that concept, because also I could segue into like gratitude around like, if you think you deserve it, then you don't enjoy it. But that has been super powerful for me, which is like, what if they're right? And because a lot of people they spend so much effort trying to fight the fact that the comments might be right. This might have been a fucking terrible thumbnail.
Yep.
You know what? This might have been a boring video. This post might have been regurgitated content. This post might have been inspired too closely by someone else's post, right? What if they're right? And does it make me a piece of shit? What if it does? And I hear stats like that and I just think, man, it is so easy to win. Like that. I mean, like when I hear that, that's exactly what I think. I'm just like, man, for everyone who's like struggling to win, it's like most of the pain that people experience is purely in their own minds. And so to your point, I think there's an interesting one between like burnout versus hard. And so like for me, burnout is when I would define it as my output per unit of time decreases. So I can see that that's measurable, right? Now, like I can say like number of pages that I edit or the quality of the content that I create, like my output per time, like the team knows when I'm like 6 hours, 7 hours into recording something, they're like, I literally start like slumping. You're like physically, I just start like slumping and I like my cadence isn't as like, I'm just not as sharp, right? There's that versus emotional burnout, which I think people mislabel as burnout when really it's just like they don't know how to reframe reality. And so what it really is they got a comment on a post that bugged them. And like, again, it's like pulling it from the shadows. It's like, no, this stuff doesn't work. It's like, hold on. What's the one voice that actually is coming through? What is the real thing? Well, there was this comment. Okay, great. It's embarrassing to even have to say that. But when you say it, then you admit it and all of a sudden you put it in the light and the shame kind of starts to evaporate. Because then you can name it and be like, is this comment bigger than my future? Is this comment bigger than me? And one of the things that that has helped me was saying like, what's true about this? You stay in poverty until you learn the first lesson of poverty, which is 2 words, my fault. And so when I was younger, I was really angry at my parents, like many people are, right? Justified or not, doesn't really matter. I was very angry and I blamed them for the woes of my life. And I realized that when I was 19, that these people that I hated, I was giving all the power over the fact that I wasn't the person I wanted to be. And I was like, well, it's their fault. And the idea that I had actually given these people that I hated power over my success was ultimately something that made me feel sick to my stomach and was what allowed me to point the finger of blame inwards and say my fault, and then at least take ownership over the fact that like, and Like, sure, maybe your dad didn't hug you enough, or maybe your mom wasn't present, or whatever it is, right? It's like, and like, I said this the other day, and it'll probably piss off a lot of your audience, so, you know, we can put our soft earphones on. Like, if you suffered from racial inequality, if you suffered from gender inequality, if you suffered from being born in Bangladesh, if you were sexually abused your entire life, you would be completely justified in the fact that you are not achieving the things that other people who didn't have those disadvantages have achieved. And I say this as a white guy who was born in America to a doctor father. I understand that. But at the same degree, you have the opportunity that Chris nor I have, which is that you can be an inspiration to people who went through the same thing and succeeded, despite those circumstances. Because I can promise that there is somebody who has had it worse and has done it better. And I think that one single point of proof, and like, there's a global point of proof that you can look for sure, but like, you can be that very local point of proof in your community or sub-community. And I think as soon as we shed that, that's like, I'm a big fan of power follows the blame finger. So like, wherever you point the blame finger is where the power follows. And so it's like, if you point it at the government has the power. If you point it at your spouse and say like, it's their fault that I'm not in shape, it's their fault, they never let me do anything, it's like, well, you're giving them all the power. And so it's like, until you're like, it's my fault, it also becomes my responsibility. What is?
What if it's not your fault?
It doesn't matter. And like, I can't run marathons because I lost my leg at birth. And either you can just never try, or you put the metal thing on and you do it anyways.
Shoot, I can't remember where it was from. But basically that the best art is art where the artist makes it for themselves, and where you see commercial work is where a bunch of people are trying to make something for an audience. And so they're trying to like rinse and recycle stuff that actually solves no one's problems, because no one is actually the audience. Whereas when you make it for yourself, there's thousands of people just like you who will have the same depth of understanding of it. But it feels selfish in the moment to make something for yourself. But when you make it for yourself, you actually make it for everyone. And so I think when you're on the start path, you can't look at the outcome as the only positive, because you will never make it. And so the positive frame that I've always used is, sure, you can have the external ones of like, I like thinking about my first videos had like 13 views. And I'm like, well, if I had an audience of 13 people, I used to spend years pitching, weight loss stuff to rooms of 13, and that was fine. And so thinking about that way was helpful. But the most helpful frame was thinking about who I was becoming as the asset that I was building. So in real time, whenever I finished a long day's work, I was becoming more like the type of person who could work for 5 years without reward. And that would be part of the story I would someday tell. And so some of the biggest reinforcers I've had in my life has been future casting the story that I would tell about the shitty period that I was in. Like, I remember when I was sleeping on the floor at my gym because I didn't have enough money for 2 rents. And I was like, I will fucking tell this story. And when I lost everything for the first time, I have the screenshot of the bank account. Like, when I show it, people are like, oh, look, there's that thing. But they forget that there was a person who screenshotted it to be like, this won't fucking happen again. And I think having a larger narrative of where you're ultimately going, one, gives you the vision of where you're knows where he's going, but it allows the dragons that you have to slay along the way, the hard things that you have to overcome, to feed into the larger narrative of the story that you'll someday tell. And so like, no one ever tells stories about the hero who made it all happen immediately and had no hardships. No one cares, right? Like, okay, you were born to a billionaire. Is there a story there? Not really, but everyone loves the story because we can see ourselves in the character and how much we hope to be like them. And it's the being like them, not the having what they have, that we usually like. And so reframing ourselves as the hero of that narrative in my harder times was what really got me through that, and thinking, I will tell this story someday. I want to give you the single easiest razor to predict my behavior. And I said, whatever will be the most epic story is the thing that I will most likely do. And so oftentimes the most epic story is not the shortest outcome to victory. It's the long saga that results in this big thing later, eventually. And I was like, if you ever want to know, if you're like, I'm not sure what he's going to do in this situation, just wonder what the most epic story to tell would be. And that's usually what I will do. And I don't know if that's self-aggrandizing, but that's genuinely my razor for even making the big decisions about, okay, I'm going to sell Gym Launch. I'm going to marry Layla. I'm going to slum it and live at the gym. I'm going to fly around and do turnarounds. I'm going to start this whole idea of a media company that just gives exclusively. But like, how do I put all these together? It's like, well, what would be the most epic story? And I thought of this idea of just like, when I think about who that story I want to tell is this billionaire that documented the entire thing
the whole way and just gave. Because I always thought, I was like, I wish that Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and all these guys would have and Jeff Bezos would have just I would love to have seen 1997 Amazon content, and a lot of the content in terms of it's getting 5 views. It's it's okay, because when we make it, they're going to come back and watch this. So I don't need them to watch it today. I want them to know that it's here when I do. And I think that got me out of the loop of it. I have to win right now. And then every one of them is just dropping a kernel or a breadcrumb for future me to refer back to. It won't get harder. This is the hardest part. And so if you can just make it through this, everything else is downhill. It's not that the things that the dragons you're going to slay aren't going to get bigger. They are. But you become so much more equipped to slay them back. And you have so many more allies. You have people in the stands cheering for you. You have the audience. You have all of these other things that are behind you. But at the beginning, it's just you with a stick against a bear. And arguably, that fight is a harder fight to win than beating a dragon when you have a nuclear bomb and 6 nations behind you. And so it's not even the size of the hardship. It's just also the resources and how few of them you have, and how so much of the beginning is literally burning the one thing you have, which is time, because you have no leverage. You don't have the money to pay other people to help you. You don't have the resources to go get someone no one can learn it for you. It's there's a lot of the things that we care about a lot. No one can work out for you. Doesn't matter how much money you have. No one can learn skills for you. And so in the early days, it feels so painful, because you're you look around to see who can help you, and then you're fuck, it's me again. And I think getting comfortable with the idea that each of these things, kind of like Slumdog Millionaire, if you've seen that movie, where I'll give you the TLDR. He goes through his entire life of randomness, and then he gets on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire version in India. And it has 12 questions to make $1 million. And from only 12 random experiences in his life that seemed meaningless at the time, was he able to answer all of the questions and then ultimately win. The skills that you develop along the way, like Steve Jobs learning calligraphy that then became Apple fonts that transformed how we type. Those early days, that little trench winning in the weeds, oftentimes gives you these huge advantages later on, because you have more context than anyone else. And so rather than lament them and hate the fact that you're going through it, remembering that these will be arrows that you put in the quiver that you're going to be using to slay the future bigger dragons. And so expecting it to be easy is what makes it much harder than it ever is. Because in the early days, hard was, ooh, stop, this isn't good. I should, this is a warning sign. This is a red flag. I should slow down, or I should stop, I should pivot. But the more I think about it as a competitive landscape, as I'm clear on what this path is supposed to look like, and these rocks and these dragons are things that I'm going to have to slay along the way to get the princess or get the treasure, I get happier about the harder it is, because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
And I think if you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're oh, poor me, to oh, poor everyone else who's going to have to fucking try.
Yeah.
And I think that is so much more motivating as a frame for the exact same circumstance. The amount of times when I was on my lonely path, where I was too different from the friends that I had, but not successful enough to be friends with the people that I wanted to be friends with. That's when you want people to root for you. That's when you want people to support you. Once you've already won, people are he's amazing, he's so good. But that's the time when you need it the least. And so you always have to be the person who roots for you before everyone else does. And it's usually a single clap in the auditorium for a very long period of time. It is a slow clap that's just you rooting for you. And that visual, I think, is one that you can kind of take, because people struggle to do things alone. And the path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be.
If somebody is starting from scratch, what are the traits, skill sets that they should be cultivating in order to up the odds of their success?
They should focus on one thing in general, rather than lots of different things that you're not sure about. Because if you're starting out, everything looks like an opportunity. So the correct answer is all of them are opportunities, but all of them won't work unless you pick one, right? So you have to say no to all the other mistresses. So boom, you pick one. And then from there, I always say 6 figures is sell something to someone. That's it. And if you want more detail, sell something to someone. So it's one avatar, one product, one channel. So you don't have to figure out, how do I create 20 pieces of content across? It's like, just pick one channel, one media source, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, whatever, Twitter. Consistently start going on that, whether that's cold outbound, whether that's content, whether it's running paid ads, whether it's affiliates, word of mouth, whatever it is, and start reaching out to people there to start selling your stuff. And so I use something that I call the Rule of 100, which is 100 primary actions, whether that's 100 minutes of content creation per day, 100 reach outs per day, $100 of ad spend per day. Like, you have to pick one of them, but 100 per day, and you do that for 100 days, and I promise you, you'll be making 6 figures if you do that. And so people are afraid of not getting validated, or they're afraid of judgment that they perceive from other people that exist or don't exist in their lives. And so for whatever reason, they have this second voice that criticizes everything they do that in reality isn't even there, but is constantly present. It's like the antithesis of whatever the God figure is, but just the negative voice. And so I think that's the thing that stops most people from doing the stuff they know they need to do. Because if you think about, like, whether it's want to get in shape, or I want to have a better marriage, or I want to make more money, most people on some level, at a basic level, they know what to do. And my proof point of, like, even making money, right? Most of us have had a bill that came up that was unexpected, a tax bill, a car breaks down, a health thing, whatever it is, and we find a way. And so when it's for someone else, people will use the actual resourcefulness that they have to make the money, but for whatever reason, they won't use that same resourcefulness to make it for themselves. And so I think that most people know, if they want to work out, to get in shape or to lose weight, whatever, they know they need to eat fewer donuts and move more in general, but they don't, right? Because they're afraid of getting started, or they don't have the discipline to keep going, which is they can't make the short-term sacrifice for the long-term achievement. So big picture, it's like, there's usually some fear that's preventing from doing it. And then how it looks from a behavioral standpoint is they do not make the short-term sacrifice of discomfort for the long-term achievement, independent of whatever path they're talking about.
So every time you watch or you consume a piece of content, you read a book, if you think, what behavior am I going to change as a result of this? If the answer is nothing, you wasted your time and you pretended to be learning, but you were really entertaining yourself. And so that frame has been incredibly helpful for me to speed up how quickly I take action, because I don't want to be a dodo bird. So that's two different ones, learning and intelligence. One that I've been thinking a lot about with Dr. K and I, we go back and forth, is motivation. So I'll tell you a story, and then I'll bring it up. I'll bring it around. So I was at an event, and a young lady said, "Alex, can you just give me 60 seconds of motivation?" And of course, it's like, dance monkey dance. And so I took a deep breath, and I was like, define motivation. And she just like melted. She had no idea, right? And I was like, so you want me to answer a question or make a statement about something that you can't even define. And so how would you have any idea of whether or not I actually did it? And so then I probably gave her the answer she really wanted, which was, let me define motivation for you. So motivation is the equal opposite of deprivation. So we are most motivated when we are deprived of something. I'm most motivated to sleep when I'm sleep deprived. I'm most motivated to eat when I'm deprived of food. I'm most motivated to have sex when I haven't had sex in a while. Now, that logic carries for physiological needs. But then when you get into psychological things or intangible constructs, so like, let's think about money. By that same logic, you'd think, oh, poor people should be more motivated because they're deprived of money. But that we don't see that in reality. Many poor people are not that motivated. So it would then follow, and I've seen some incredibly rich people who are wildly hungry for money. And so then it would follow that the deprivation comes from our reference point, because money is intangible. And so it's, how much do we perceive our deprivation around money? And so if all of my friends are billionaires and I'm worth $100 million, then I have a $900 million deficit that I have to come up. I'm $900 million poorer than the person who just is at $5,000 a month who wants to make $10,000 a month. I'm more motivated to make money than they are because I'm more deprived of it. And so in thinking about this, I then think, okay, what am I deprived of? That motivates me to go get it. And also, when I want to try and judge the behavior of others or predict their behavior, I have to think, what things are they deprived of? Because I'll have a much stronger predictive power than trying to say, how do I motivate this person? Look at what they lack.
It's a much more accurate way to predict the things that people are going to chase after.
Operationalized. What do they do?
So I found this quote from Timothy Leary, and it's really fantastic. I think that you'll like this. Find the others. Admit it, you aren't like them. You're not even close. You may occasionally dress yourself up as one of them, watch the same mindless television shows as they do, maybe even eat the same fast food sometimes. But it seems that the more you try to fit in, the more you feel like an outsider. Watching normal people as they go about their automatic existences. For every time you say club passwords like "have a nice day" and "weather's awful today, eh?" you yearn inside to say forbidden things like "tell me something that makes you cry" or "what do you think deja vu is for?" Face it, you even want to talk to that girl in the elevator. But what if that girl in the elevator and the balding man who walks past your cubicle at work are thinking the same thing? Who knows what you might learn from taking a chance on a conversation with a stranger? Everybody carries a piece of the puzzle. Nobody comes into your life by mere coincidence. Trust your instincts, do the unexpected, find the others.
There's many matrix undertones here. I mean, I think we might have covered this on a past podcast, but the idea that many people want to be exceptional, but they're afraid of being an exception, I think is such a, it's wanting an outcome without the requirement that the outcome has. And so we can't do the same thing that everyone else approves of and then somehow get a different outcome that everyone else does. And so I think that's why high agency for me is something that I look for in other people, which is, asking someone, why do you believe what you believe? And we talked about this yesterday, but if you have a belief and you can't explain why you believe it, it's not yours, it's someone else's. And most people walk around parroting other people's words for the vast majority of their lives. And so they basically act as recorders, where they clicked record at one point of their life and then they click play in another time in their life, and they're just clicking record, play over and over again. And the reason there's that, in my opinion, that other self that's behind it is because none of those words are yours. And so it makes sense that people feel alone and they feel like they're acting because they never say what they think. And as a result, they also sound like everyone else because they were never themselves to begin with.
To those first three lines, admit it, you aren't like them, you're not even close. And it sounds quite sort of self-aggrandizing or kind of narcissistic in a way to, you're considering yourself as being above other people. I don't think it's to do with that. I think it's that so many people curtail themselves and optimize for a mean that may not exist. They're reverting to a mean that's just a figment of everybody's imagination. And the only reason that people coalesce there is because other people think that other people are going to coalesce there. The Keynesian beauty contest?
No.
Same as that, basically.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay. So Keynesian beauty contest is people make judgments on not who they think is the most beautiful, but on who they think other people think are the most beautiful, and then knowing that other people know that other people are going to make that decision based on that, you end up with this infinite regress of trying to predict things. This is what's happening with politics, right? It's not about picking the person that you want in your area, it's about making the most tactical pick to ensure that overall, accounting for the other people and what they're going to choose, that the person that you really don't want in power doesn't get the seat in your area, but somebody else in some other area. So when you have this sort of recursive, but it happens socially too. I say the thing that I think that you want to hear, knowing that you know that I could say the thing that I want, but so what I say is some mediator halfway between what I want to say and what I think you want to hear from me. And it just ends up with people, nobody being themselves and everybody being some weird simulacrum of what they think everybody else wants them to be.
And if we go back to motivation, the question is, what, quote, motivates people to do this or to behave in this way? And so most times it's fear of something, right? And so they're afraid of something in their minds. But when you actually play it out, which is one of my favorite frames in the world, which is, let's take this to the hypothetical extreme, or let's play it out two more plays, two more turns. And most times you end up getting way closer to what you really want the moment after the bad thing that you think will happen happens. And so we've discussed that there's so many amazing things that have happened in my life and your life and many people's lives that happened immediately after they get out, they have something bad happen that gets them out of that realm of just barely good enough, but not really. And so we have this fear of disrupting the just barely good enough, but not really, but you're also already miserable. And so the fear of disrupting your misery feels ridiculous. And so when you think about
Nothing
it like
to lose.
that, right? So when you think about it like that, exactly. The only thing we have to lose is the current misery of mediocrity that we're trudging through every day. And so worst case, you're just also still miserable, but maybe you won't be mediocre anymore because at least you won't be like everyone else. But there's also a possibility that you are not miserable and also not mediocre. And by doing that, you might also just start seeing who you really are, because I think a great portion of our identity comes from the proof that we give ourselves of the things that we've done and said in the past. And so if we want to build towards a different version of ourselves, then it begins with accruing, stacking evidence that aligns with that future self. And so in some ways, break the plate, take the shot, get rejected.
Look,
Because when you do that, then again, the worst case is you have a broken plate, but you didn't like that plate to begin with.
it is astounding how many people want to be spectacular in life but also want to fit in and be normal. Like, by being normal, you are, by definition, aiming for average. Normal people get normal results. Weird people get weird results. You literally can't do what everyone else does and not expect to get what everyone else has. By doing what everyone else does, you guarantee average results.
It's your brother, your mom, your friend, the one comment they're going to say, you've changed. Why are you doing another kick like this? Oh, you're going to try that now. Okay, here we go again. And the thing is that it's not about them being right or wrong. Again, it's about how right and how wrong they could be. And so, for example, let's say you wanted to start a podcast in the past and you did 3 episodes and then you fell off. And then they think, I told you so. Stop with these dreams. Stop with this crazy content stuff. You're never going to become an influencer, or whatever your goal is. Replace influencer with whatever your thing is. The thing is that you are still closer having done 3 than having done 0. And so it's just about directional correctness and realizing that criticizers are more often correct, but when it matters most, incorrect.
I haven't learned much about the habits of the rich at all, to be very candid with you. I think that maybe there are some beliefs that, because like my dad was a doctor, I wouldn't say he was like, ultra wealthy, but like we lived an upper middle class, lifestyle. But in terms of like wealth, as I think you and I would probably understand it, I didn't know anything about that. And I don't think I've ever really studied it very much. I would say that my heroes now, like I started studying wealth after I became wealthy. So like,
What did you learn about it afterwards? And what do wealthy people do that you think poor people don't do?
they pick higher leverage opportunities in a sentence. So like rich dad, poor dad, like poor dad says get a job. Poor dad says get a higher paying job. Like rich dad says like, and the thing is there's so many innate beliefs that seem commonplace. Like, well, of course, you know what I mean? Like, well, of course, you buy some real estate and it'll appreciate over time. Of course, you invest in some stocks. Like, yeah, of course. But like poor dads just don't say that. And so you have to like learn that, I think. And I didn't, so I'm grateful in that I didn't have to learn that because I heard that just was, of course, yeah, once you have some money, like, of course you don't spend your whole income. Of course you don't. And so there's a lot of course you don'ts that I think I inherited just by being in like a saving father. But there's also some upper middle class people who don't save anything. Money hygiene. I think I've had a lot of really good money hygiene from my dad. The big breakthrough that I had for me was when I stopped focusing on, and this is going to sound backwards, but when I started my gyms, I was all about building the business, right? And when I built the biggest companies that I've had and now recently sold, and now we have our portfolio, it was about how do we make the most money? And I know that sounds completely backwards, but the only way that you can make the most money is to provide an exceptional valued service and charge a ton of money for it. And because I optimized around making money, I started going for low capital expense businesses because I had lost everything after that 5-year stint. And so I was like, never again am I going to reinvest every dollar from the business back into the business because I've lost it before. So when I started the next business and every business I've had thereafter, like we take dividends every month. And we do that because...
You don't wait till there's an exit 10 years later and put all your money in.
I'd love to do both.
Yeah.
Why not both?
Sure.
Right? And so that was...
Take a dividend and get a bigger
Of course.
pay. Yeah. But not just put money in and wait and get no money back.
100%. And the thing is, and this was a fallacy I had, because people always talk about like reinvesting in their business, but I realized that just meant that they weren't making profit. And so the vast majority of businesses, even the software world is somewhat shifting in this, but they want to see profit. And then even better is if you have net free cash flow, which is just a fancy word for the amount of money that you can take out every month after making necessary investments in the business. And so I wanted to have businesses that pumped cash flow because I had lost it all before. Not ask for 12 months and just serve. By all means, go get your bag. You know
Make
what
as
I mean?
much as you can.
Yeah, by all means. But I think that what it does is it ends up freeing you to then make your real impact, because then you can start whatever the next thing, and hopefully your first thing is that thing, but realistically it probably isn't. And all you have to do is look at every entrepreneur that's really wealthy, the amount of graveyard businesses they have in their back. Right. And so like right now, if you're listening and you're like, I'm not sure if this is the perfect business idea, let me just save you the time. It's not, because look at every other person who has been ultra successful. They have 10 failed business ideas. So just start, so you can just start notching off the bad businesses, right? But extending the time horizon, I think only happens if you do shift the intention through which you're building it, or you're just unbelievably self-disciplined. But I think it's easier to just like start at it with the right heart, because small tangent, but I think it'll be worth it, is that the reason that most people aren't successful, in my opinion, is that they sacrifice global benefit for local benefit. And that happens in all areas of life. You eat the piece of cake because you have an acute local benefit versus the global benefit of a six-pack that lasts for a very long time, or better health, etc., right?
You mean the instant gratification as opposed to delayed gratification?
Yes. Inflated sense of self, as in they thought that they deserved big things, they wanted to go after big things.
They believed in themselves, right?
Inferiority, never being good enough, and impulse control.
Those are the three factors of the most successful.
They're like, when they did a common factors analysis, like these people think, they believe that they can achieve all this amazing stuff, and then it's an amazing paradox, because at the same time they think they're not good enough, and they are insecure about whether they can achieve it. And they have impulse control. And so it's like, if you
discipline,
have and they stay focused on the thing. And what I'd say the biggest breakthroughs that I've had, I think that will create a lot of the wealth that we will have in the future, is really a deep understanding of how long is, and shooting with the intention of, like, I'm only bringing this up because my YouTube guy said it. He's like, I've never had somebody who actually started it. I was like, we'll see what we do in 5 years. I was like, we'll measure that. And he was like, no one has literally ever said that to me. I was like, as long as I see progress, I'm good.
Because everyone wants results in like 2 months.
Like if we're going this way, I'm cool. I don't need to say, like, that's good enough. For most people, if they could extend the time horizon, because like, I'll give you another hack. You can know how wealthy someone is based on the time horizons they speak in.
Give me an example.
So if someone's talking about how they're trying to make money today, like, hey, let me hold 20 for today. You know how poor they are. I have to say poor. Like, you know how poor they are, right? If someone's talking about what they're going to make this week, or this month, or this quarter, or this year, or this decade, think about how different the people are who are talking in those time horizons. And so I think that if we can shift the time horizon that we think in, then we gain more leverage over our time, which we then know we will compound into money. Because I think if you can master the time, you master the money.
I see the pursuit of knowledge and its corollary, how I like it, the pursuit of learning, changing our behavior, to be my ultimate purpose in life. Because if I think about myself as going through life, then I want to learn as much as I can, which is changing my behavior, ideally suited to the direction that I want to go in. As for if you want to change your life, change your surroundings. If we want to behave a certain way, then we want to increase the likelihood that a behavior occurs. And so B.F. Skinner said this, and I just love this. It's like my most savage quote of his. He says, people say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. False. He said, if I dehydrate the horse, I salt its mouth, I put it in the heat, and I put its face 1 inch away from water, I can veritably guarantee that it will drink. And I think about that visual all the time when I think about myself as the horse. And I think to myself, what is the behavior that I want, drinking water? And what is the salt in my mouth? And what is the dehydration, the motivation for this behavior that I can create? And so I am not a believer in free will. I believe that we respond to the conditions that we've had, and then we learn behaviors as a result of those things. And so, for example, I could get everyone in here, the entire crew, to get naked. Guarantee you, I could do it. All I would do is I'd just crank up the temperature and I'd wait. And eventually, everyone would get naked. It would happen. And so everyone has this idea that they have this free will, but that's what would happen eventually. And so if that's true, then we have significantly less control, and at the same time more control of our behavior if we can stack the deck in our favor. And so part of the reason going to bed at 9 p.m. is so powerful is because we're changing the conditions so that we can change our behavior. If all of your friends are poor, Harvard did that long study and said that the number one correlate was your reference group, which is who you compare yourself to. Also note, not who you spend the most time with, it's who you compare yourself to. And so if you want to change your life, change who you compare yourself to. Number one. But part of who you compare yourself to is who you spend your time with, or who at least you consume the most of. So if you're doing this, then maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's a terrible thing because you're comparing the wrong people. But either way, if you want to get fit, if you get around fitter people, you will be deprived of fitness because you'll be the least in shape person. And then all of a sudden you'll be more motivated. If you are poor, but you're the richest of your friends or the same level of wealth as your friends, then get around people who make more money. And then of course people say, but I can't get around people who make more money. Okay, no one else has ever done it. No one who has had it worse than you has ever figured out how to do it. You're right. Right, of course you're not right, so shut the fuck up.
Thoughts aren't true.
I mean, how many things do we think every day that are just false? One, they can be factually false, but also from the reactionary perspective. I'll give you an example. So someone miscommunicates and wrongs me in some way. I get angry and think I should wrong them back. Now that's my first thought. If I then say, what does that behavior increase the likelihood of occurring as a result? What do I want to have happen as a result of my behavior? Well, I want them to apologize, or I want them to just not do that again. Well, then me reacting back to them increases the likelihood that they will retaliate. And so in doing what my first thought was, I increase the likelihood of the negative occurrence that I'm trying to avoid. And so thinking through what happens after that thing in interpersonal dynamics and also from a business decisions perspective has helped me so much. Like I'll give you an example of one that happened not that long ago. Somebody reached out to me, relatively big account, and says, hey, can you read my book? It would mean the world to me if you left me an endorsement. And I said, out of respect for you, I won't just ghost this message or give you a half-hearted answer and then just hope that you forget that I said yes. I'm not going to endorse your book, but you're welcome to send it to me. I will probably just flip through it because I have a lot of other books that I need to read that are more closely related to my goal. But I appreciate the flattery that's implied in you asking me to do that. Before I wrote that message, I was like, okay, what do I want to have happen after I send this message? Now, if I just ghost him, then I will probably have a null outcome. And he'll probably have a slight negative because he'll remember, but he'll be like, okay, fine, that was his way of saying no. But if I compliment him, thank him for the compliment with me, and also tell the truth, I'll probably get somebody who in the future will know that my yes means something when I choose to do it. And so it's thinking like 2 steps ahead of what happens after I say this thing back, and how do I increase the likelihood of that second move, not the first move. And it sounds silly to say because people are like, oh, of course, but like I don't think most people do that. And it has helped me so much. And even like with interpersonal dynamics with my marriage with Layla, if I want Layla to talk to me a certain way, then if I punish her when she doesn't talk to me that way, what she'll really do is she'll avoid talking to me in general. And so it's like I have to find a time when she does that thing so that I can immediately reward her so that I can increase the likelihood that it occurs. And so I think about this all the time with most of the dynamics that we have. And so anyways, I'll just stop on that tangent. But
I think this is something, especially over the last year, that as a rehabilitating people pleaser, big people pleaser, being able to make your needs known, being able to make demands is a real skill. And it's so strange given that pursuing your needs is maybe one of the most fundamental human things that there is. But I kind of realized that, especially people that you respect in a sort of social dynamics way, people don't want to hear what they want to hear. They want to hear what you actually think about a thing. So many times someone will ask your opinion. What do you think of the Oppenheimer movie? What you think they want to hear is whatever they think, which is, oh, wasn't it great? Did you watch it in IMAX? Yeah, I did. Did you get Sour Patch Kids? Yeah, I did. But what they actually want to hear, if you were to say, do you know what it is, man? Like, I don't know. It was just a little sort of drawn out for me and all of the visual effects felt a little bit more. I haven't seen it. I don't fucking know. But what you think people want to hear is not what they actually want to hear. They want to hear what you think. And that requires you to tell the truth. And oddly enough, that means that telling someone what they don't want to hear ends up with a bigger net positive for you than actually giving them the thing that they wanted.
For the business owners or for the advertisers in the room or the people who make content, by the way, this is the ultimate hack, is just tell the truth. Because when you do that, you will by definition make very unique content because everyone else is so afraid of thinking or saying what they actually think. And so you can stand out without trying to stand out. The problem is that the vast majority of people who quote make content or try to quote add value just regurgitate what they think adds value rather than just saying what they really think.
Also the benefit of experience, right? Because it's the only way that you can stress test whether or not this thing that you're trying to talk about is an actual thing. And you also get an extra perspective on that too, when you know that this is what most of the people say about a thing, and I have tried it, and this is my perspective on not only the thing, but why other people think that this thing is a thing, given that I know that it doesn't work. Feelings don't require action, very similar.
I think this one is super powerful for, we'll relate all phases, but especially the beginner. So if you're a beginner, you have to separate you feeling something and you acting on that feeling. Because you may feel hopeless many, many times, but you need to continue to do the activities that are aligned with your goal. You may feel hungry, but you need to not eat the cookie to stay aligned with your goal. You may feel angry, but know that retaliating at your coworker has no likely positive outcome. You may hate your boss, but undermining them in front of the team may make you feel good in the moment, but again, destroy your long-term career prospects. And so I think creating a gap. And so I was talking to one of our CEOs who was having a little bit of stress issue, and I said, I want you to think that you're a Yeti can. I want you to think you're one of these cans that has a vacuum between both walls. I was like, you got your feelings on one side, you've got your internal temperature, and you've got your external temperature. And I was like, I just want you to do this. Just create space. And space within the context of behavior is time, which is when I feel something and I have the desire to act on it, you can, at that moment, you have the lowest action threshold, which means that you're the highest likelihood of behaving or doing something is when you have this feeling. And so I want to make as logical of decisions as I possibly can. Hopefully we're all aligned on the fact that logical decisions in general work out better than illogical decisions. And so if we make logical decisions on a regular basis, then we'll have longer term outcomes. If we want to increase the likelihood that our decisions in general are logical, then we want to create space between when we feel and when we do. And encapsulated in one sentence, it's just because you feel something doesn't mean you need to act on it. And if you have an idea that you want to act on because of a feeling, if it still feels good in the morning, then do it. But I've never regretted taking time before acting when I was angry. But I sure as hell have regretted almost everything that I've done immediately the moment I felt angry.
Things aren't good or bad, they just are.
I think what makes life more difficult for people is the judgment they have on themselves about what they believe they're supposed to do or supposed to have achieved, or that this condition or this thing that happened is good or bad, or it should have been good or it should have been badder. And the story of the boy with the horse in the village, tell it in 30 seconds, which is dad gets kid a horse and everybody in the village says, that's amazing. The old man says, we'll see. And then the kid is riding the horse and he breaks his leg and everyone in this town says, oh, that's so horrible. And the old man says, we'll see. And then the army comes to town to take all of the young men to war, and the kid can't go because his leg is broken. And everyone says, that's amazing. And the old man says, we'll see. And the thing is that as we continue to play out the timeline of life, we can't know if anything is good or bad until the day we die. And the day we die won't matter because we'll be dead. And so it means that at the end of the day, all of the things that occur simply occur. And for me, reminding myself of that I think this is bad or I think this is good, it limits the peaks and it also limits the valleys, and saying, this just is. And I think it's, in my opinion, absolute acceptance of the world without casting judgment on it. And it's difficult to do because we all want to make judgments and we have to make judgments in order to live. We have to approximate, this is a good decision, bad decision. This is a decision that will increase the likelihood that what I want to have happen will happen. But most of the good bads that we have that are coming up are not for our own benefit, are not aligned with our goals. They're aligned with one person that told us something when we were 7 years old, and then we incorporated that and we say, oh, this is bad, because someone else, when we were a kid, like you hit your head and then you look at the adult and the adult says, that's bad. And you say, oh, it's bad, I'm going to cry now, right? And so there are so many thousands and millions of those tiny judgments that are passed on to us that do not serve us. And so for me, it has been more beneficial to whitewash everything and then actively rebuild what I believe to be good or bad based on those things, but with a baseline reality that none of it is.
It is kind of narcissistic or solipsistic to believe that you know whether a thing is good or bad.
It means you know the future.
You know what the outcome of this is going to be, right? There's this story that I couldn't believe. It was about September 11th. So I didn't realize this, but the night before September 11th actually had quite bad weather, I think. And it meant that people getting home from baseball games got home way later. And then you'll remember the morning of September 11th, it's beautiful blue, clear skies. So had that storm been only 12 hours later, the whole world would have been different, but it wasn't. There's this story of a guy who was going for a meeting, and I think it was his birthday. The lady that he worked with had got him one of these illustration ties, sort of gaudy, hideous thing with drawings all over it. And he was wearing a shirt that clashed with it. And she gifted him this as they had coffee on the morning of September 11th, early, downtown Manhattan. And she says, look, your shirt's wrinkled and it really doesn't go with this tie. Wear the tie, it'll make you feel confident. It's a nice present for you. So he goes back to the hotel. She goes to the North Tower. She dies. He's alive. How on earth are you supposed to say giving that tie was good or bad? You have no idea what's going to happen downstream from the things that occur.
So I know this guy who has a podcast, and years ago he like snapped his Achilles and could barely walk. And so the crazy thing is that many people in that time would have been like, this is the worst thing that could have possibly happened. But because he had snapped his Achilles, he was like, well, I have to make the best of this. I have to do something. I might as well stick with that podcast that I said I was going to start. And then years later, he became a top 50 podcast in the world. And I think an amazing frame is you can make anything that feels circumstantially negative in the moment if you ask the question, what would make this thing the best thing ever? And so I would argue, maybe you would agree, that you snapping your Achilles was probably the best thing that ever happened to you because it got you here. And right now, you probably have your version of the snapped Achilles that's going on in your life, but there's also the version of the top 50 in the world podcast that is waiting for you to take action as a result of your snapped Achilles.
I always had this problem with people who said it was meant to be, right? Because retrospectively, you're kind of taking your agency out of the situation. So for instance, me saying, I'm so glad that COVID happened and shut all of the nightclubs down, which forced my business to close so that I could focus on the podcast, so that I would restart playing cricket, so that I would snap my Achilles, so that I would then move to America and then blah, 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 blah. But I actually think that that's quite a disempowering frame to put around things, because it goes, it totally takes away the difficulty that you had to overcome. You know, if you're in a car accident and you break your femur and you say, it was meant to be because I met my partner who was the nurse that looked after me while I was being rehabbed back to health. You go, okay. Or on the flip side of that, you managed to be sufficiently charming to get a partner while you had a snapped femur in the hospital. That wasn't meant to be. That was your agency. So retrospectively, you want it all to be on you and known. And in advance, you want it all to be completely up in the air and unknown.
I think the high agency frame allows you to break your Achilles and say, what will I do to make this amazing? And I think that's where the magic happens, because then everything serves you.
Our actions, not our pasts, define who we are.
Victims see their past as their fate. Champions see their past as their origin story. And so a lot of people are living through their origin story right now, or they're living through the very reason that they'll never be successful, but it could be the exact same situation. And the only difference between either character is the actions they choose to take. Which means that if you're using Joe Rogan's frame, waking up in your main player character today in this moment, as weird of a construct as this is, the past doesn't exist. Just gone. It's not anywhere. And so the only thing that we absolutely have control over is the actions that we take right now. And it's a weird eraser of time to when you really start thinking that like it's only exists in chemicals in my brain, but it doesn't exist right now to think about the past that way. But in some ways, it's also very freeing because it means that I get to start with no baggage. And in some ways, for me, it makes the present feel light.
Because you're not carrying anything into it. Have you seen that Tim Urban illustration of the tree of time, these sort of branches? So it starts off with life and there's only one black branch that is the particular path that you took, and there's all of these green ones that you haven't taken, and then it gets to now. There's a line where it's now, and then it turns to every branch is potential, right? So you had lots that could have been, only one that was, and now you have lots that could be and an unlimited number that may be altogether. And you're right, it's light. When you think about that frame, it makes the present moment feel, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter what happened when I was a kid. It doesn't matter.
It only matters if you make it matter.
So Jean-Paul Sartre, someone screenshotted this from a book. I have no idea what the book is, but it's a motherfucker. I have led a toothless life. I have never bitten into anything. I was waiting. I was reserving myself for later on, and I have just noticed that my teeth have gone.
A lot of people wait for perfect conditions to start, but don't realize that starting is the perfect condition. And the part of that quote that I like a lot from Sartre, little French Sartre, is your teeth can get sharper and stronger too, so that he's saving himself to use his teeth, but he could have had all of his teeth at the end if he had been using them the whole time. And so we have this idea, I call it the fallacy of the perfect pick, but thinking that you're going to have this one shot, this one pick of this one opportunity, this one podcast, this one whatever, that's going to take you all the way. But it's the habit of biting that takes you all the way, not where you choose to bite the first time. And I obviously now have a huge history of this, and you do too, which is we have learned to just bite and know that our teeth will get stronger and we will learn how to chomp down along the way. And waiting to begin never got anyone anywhere.
Yeah, I kind of became obsessed with this belief that one day life's duties will be out of the way and then you can finally start doing the thing that you want to do or you're meant to do. Marie-Louise von Franz says, she calls it the provisional life, which I love. There is this strange feeling that one is not yet in real life. For the time being, one is doing this or that, but there is always the fantasy that sometime in the future, the real thing will come about. It's also known as deferred happiness syndrome, the common feeling that your life has not yet begun, that your present reality is a mere prelude to some idyllic future. This idyll is a mirage that'll fade as you approach, revealing that the prelude you rushed through was in fact the one to your death. There really isn't any other time. And the more, this is one of the, I guess, melancholy realizations of getting older, that you actually think, oh my, you know what it is? There are things that I can't do now that I could have done before. It is going, for both of us, it is going to get linearly harder to build muscle for the rest of time. It's never going to be as easy as it was 10 years ago to build muscle. And you go, okay, well, that's an argument for starting sooner. And the same thing goes for becoming more psychologically healthy, for becoming more balanced, for becoming more wealthy, for investing in good habits, friends. Oh God, Christopher Hitchens. It is a melancholy lesson of older life that you can no longer make old friends. Find your people now. Find your people right now and become friends with them. Find your habits right now and start doing them.
Yeah, it's never been easier to get in muscle than it was 10 years ago. It's never been easier to make money than it was 10 years ago, but it'll also never be easier than it is right now. It'll only get harder. And so that's actually like a pretty strong impetus to do it now. It'll literally never get easier.